軸南アフリカ出身のコメディアン作者として有名なトレバー・ノアさんのBorn a Crime という小説についてご紹介していただきます。トム先生はウェールズ出身で、ウェールズのケルト人と神道との関係についてプレゼンしてくれます。講師へのご質問やコメントがあれば、英語でも、日本語でも大丈夫ですので、気軽に右側にありますチャットボックスから、送信をお願いいたします。はい。では、ケイティさんの方からプレゼンテーションを始めたいと思うんですけれども、動画の方をはい、まもなく始まります。Katie, can you start sharing your video in your presentation?
Hi. Oh, okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Katy. I'm from South Africa. And for this book club, I've decided to talk about the book Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. He's a much loved South African comedian and talk show host. So we're going to be going through all the different elements of this book in my presentation. So I'm going to share the screen. All right. How do I make this small? Okay. So Trevor Noah, we're going to be talking about the characters in the book, the setting of the book, conflicts, and the different themes of the book as well. So a little bit of background from this book. This book is a story about a native South African man and his journey from the ghettos of South Africa to the desk of The Daily Show in New York City, South Africa. So the characters, let's start by discussing all the important people in Trevor Noah's story. So firstly, Trevor Noah is a South African host. He is a comedian as well as a political commentator. He began his career in 2002 as a stand-up comedian. And in 2010, he created his own show in South Africa called Tonight with Trevor. And 4 years later, he became the senior international correspondent for The Daily Show. And Trevor was raised in the Black township of Soweto in South Africa during apartheid. The next character is Patricia Noah, and Patricia is Trevor's biological mother. She's a native South African of the Xhosa tribe, that's how you pronounce that. There's about 12 different tribes in South Africa, so one of them is the Xhosa tribe. And Trevor describes his mother as his teammate growing up. She taught him to dream big, have a fighter's spirit, be independent, as well as free thinking. She wanted to give him the gift of freedom in a time where that seemed impossible. And we're going to see why, because of apartheid later on. His father's name was Robert Noah, and Robert is Trevor's father, and he is of Swiss and German descent. Trevor describes his father as being very serious. He was distant during Trevor's childhood, but Trevor says his presence was always pleasurable. So they had a good relationship at the time. So the setting of the book. At the time of his birth, Trevor's parents had an interracial relationship, and it was illegal under apartheid. So apartheid was a system developed by the white-controlled government in South Africa that separated people according to the color of their skin. So it was illegal for different people of different races to be in relationships. So whites were seen as superior and were forbidden to have any relationship with Black people. So Trevor being born was evidence of a crime that his parents had committed under apartheid. That's why the book is called Born a Crime, because him being born was the evidence of a crime that his parents had committed. If Black people were found having interracial relationships, they could be punished by 5 years in prison, and the white person would not go to prison at all. So you can see that it was an unfair treatment. You know, the treatment was not the same. If a mixed race child was seen by the police, they would be taken to an orphanage and separated from their family. So for this reason, for most of Trevor's childhood, he was not allowed to go to school with other Black children. He was basically homeschooled for a long time. The book gives a deeper look into South African history. So because of apartheid, you can see more information about apartheid and how it affected people's lives, like Trevor, as well as his parents, who were not mixed race, but because they had an illegal relationship, still had to maneuver the system of apartheid and not get caught. So the conflict. In Trevor's journey, it is clear that he tries to find his identity. The book is a story of coming of age and all the self-awareness that comes with it. So Trevor grew up mostly alone because he was not allowed to socialize with many other children in fear of the police finding him. So he struggled to find out where he belonged. But Trevor says that he was never lonely. He was just good at being alone. And as an outsider, the world is never yours. So you're more likely to be open to other people. And I think this is what helped him be such a successful comedian, is that he could relate to everybody because he saw the world from everybody's eyes, because he did not belong to one specific group or one specific race of people. He was always trying to find out about other people as well. So getting to know them was something that helped him to relate better when he was telling jokes. So apartheid was the biggest difficulty for Trevor's life. The law had rules for Black people, white people, Indian people, as well as Asian people. But mixed race people were illegal, so they were ignored by most communities because they did not belong to one particular group. This ended up working in Trevor's favor because he met all types of people and learned their languages and found it easy to make friends with people. This also helped his career with comedy because he found it easy to relate with many different people, and he found out what makes them all laugh. And he also knew about all the different cultures in South Africa. As I had said before, there are about 12 different cultures in South Africa, so 12 different languages, 12 different kinds of people. And, you know, Trevor found it easy to adapt to all these different people because he did not belong to any of those official 12 tribes. So the themes. The book beautifully tells Trevor's story about overcoming his struggles. It makes you feel connected with its relatability and pure honesty in a comedic light. So he finds a way to tell his story in a funny way, and you see that it relates more when you can laugh a little bit about the struggles and the stories. The stories in Trevor's book are hilarious. They're detailed and they're genuine. They're very honest. They're very from the heart. And it's the story of success over his struggle. So there is much to learn from the book as well. Another common theme in the book is the love that Trevor has for his mother. She single-handedly impacted his view of the world. She wanted to emphasize how big the world is and encouraged him to ask questions and seek out knowledge and never take things for what they are. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. Dom, do you have any comments or questions for the presentation?
Yes, I do, please. Katie, you mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, which was wonderful. Thank you very much for that. You mentioned he grew up in the ghettos. Could you explain a little bit more about what ghettos are?
Sure, of course. So ghetto is an unplanned township. It's an unplanned neighborhood. It's not very well planned by the government. So the houses, they're like shanty towns in terms of they were just made spontaneously. They weren't planned with brick and concrete. People just had to make their own houses wherever they could find space. So that's what I mean by the ghettos. And usually they were overpopulated. And because they were not planned by the government, it was just the people that made the houses. They didn't have a lot of access to water, plumbing, indoor plumbing, electricity, and things like that. So that's what I mean by the ghettos of South Africa.
Thank you. I've just got one more question as well. You talked about his background. He was always alone and but he found his own identity. He was good at being alone. Were there any stories or any more background you can share about his life at this time? Was it difficult, for example?
So his life, he did not see it as difficult. Because that was his normal. He didn't know any other way of living life. So he grew up with his grandmother mostly. But when he went to high school, he did go to an actual school. He is described as being a mischievous child. He was always happy, but he always asked a lot of questions and wanted to seek out knowledge because his mother always encouraged him to ask questions and never take things for what they were. So because of this, he got into trouble a lot of the times at school because he would ask a lot of questions and would not just take what the teachers gave to him. So because of that, he was labeled as mischievous. But for the most part, he did have a good upbringing. He was mostly raised by his mother and his grandmother. So yeah.
Thank you.
I'm also going to look at some of the questions or comments we have in the chat. ちょっとチャットのコメントもこれから確認いたしますので、皆さんもし聞きたいこととかコメントしたいことありましたらぜひお願いします。あと、トレバー・ノアご存知方はいますでしょうか？はい、ちょっとコメント確認します。Yuna is first she sent a crying emoji which she sent while you were explaining about his childhood, and then she also sent the question, did Trevor's mom go to prison due to the relationship?
Trevor's mother never went to prison. They actually had a good way of disguising that Trevor was, they had a mixed race child. So in the book, he says a story about when his father and his mother were walking in town and they would walk together. But if there was any police or anything, his father would walk on the other side of the street so that they wouldn't know that he really was a mixed race child. They wouldn't know that they were the parents and he was the child. So he actually says that he thought it was a game, so he took everything very lightheartedly in his life. So no, she was never caught.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to know. Thank you. And Koka BT first commented, it was a good story. So thank you so much for that. And also they knew Trevor Noah, so they knew who he was. So he's even known in Japan. Yeah. Feel free to send any additional comments, and we can also still check those after the other presentation. 残りのコメントは、次のプレゼンテーションの後にも確認いたしますので、ぜひこれからもお願いします。And oh yeah, Yuna is also saying thank you for the answer. And then, yeah, if we want to move on to Dom's presentation, if you're ready to start. Yes, please.
Can I just say hello to my students? I have a student that joined in, so I just wanted to say hello and thank you, and then thank them for joining the presentation.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Then, Dom, yes, if you want to start, please feel free to share your presentation.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to start now. Let me know if you can see that okay.
I see a white screen right now.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Okay. So good morning, good evening. My name is Teacher Dom. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the Celts. Now, it's not Celts, it's Celts, but who were they? And how are they linked to Shinto? So when we think about Celts, normally the first thing we think about is this man, Braveheart. And this is how we think of Celts around the world. But is it true? Were Celts like this? This is an image of a Celt drawn by Romans. And this is the traditional image that the people around the world thought the Celts were like. But there's more to the Celts. For example, sorry, I'm just trying to move some things here. Okay, I can't see my presentation. Sorry, just one moment.
No problem.
Oh, all right. I'm trying to stop. I'm just going to stop for a moment if I can. No, I can't. Okay, so we're going to carry on. So These were warrior people. That means they fought in a lot of battles. They were fighting all the time. And it is true, they did paint themselves blue to go into battle. They had access to blue paint, and this was meant to make the enemy scared and frightened of them. Also, there's one problem we have with the Celts. There's no written history. They only spoke stories to themselves. They had an oral history, that's speaking from one to another. They didn't write anything down. So unfortunately, the only thing we really know about the Celts comes from the Romans, and the Romans were their enemies. Celts and Romans were often fighting. So the view we have of Celts is warrior savages. That means not very intelligent and crazy animal-like people. But is this true? Let's find out. So first of all, the Celts were more than warriors. They did more than fighting. For example, they were craftsmen as well. And what are craftsmen? These are people who make things, for example, out of wood, out of metal, out of iron, and other metals. Also, they had a great respect for women. Women were actually treated equally. Now, this is not true anywhere else in the world at that time. Women were of equal status. They had the same rights as men. Also, the women liked to fight. This is a picture of the famous Boudica or Boadicea, and she loved a battle. So women did have power, that's understood. Also, they could own their own land. So they had farms, they had areas where they could build houses, and the house, the farm, the land belonged to the woman, not to the man. Also, they had the right to divorce their husband, to separate from their husband. This, again, was nowhere in existence in the world at the time. Finally, they did fight in battle, and also they taught boys and girls how to fight. So we know they were very valued and had equal status. This is another image we think of when we talk about the Celts. But is it a true image, or is it one written by the Romans, their enemies? It's true they did go to fight, but did they go to fight without clothes, as the Romans often wrote? This is another image that the Romans shared around the world, but it's not true. They didn't fight naked. It's complete lies. But where did they come from, these Celtic people? Well, this is a map of Europe. You can see the UK, Britain, England in the top left. That's Spain in the bottom left, and then Rome at the bottom and Greece. And the major Celtic area of that time was all over Europe, up to Eastern Europe, where today we find Ukraine. But the problem is we don't know where they started. They had no written history. They spoke history from person to person. And so we have no idea where they came from exactly. But we know they more or less started in this area. And also, they were not one nation. They were not one people together. There were lots of different Celtic clans and tribes. Now, tribe is a small group of Celts together. They could be 10, 20, 50, 100 people. When they came together with other tribes, they formed clans. And this is an organization of Celts coming together. But each group, each tribe, and each clan had very different laws and customs and traditions. So they were very different people. But where did they come from and where did they travel? Now, here you can see a map of Europe again, with Italy at the bottom and Spain on the left and UK at the top left. They came all the way from Ukraine, all through Southern Europe, and they traveled thousands and thousands of miles all the way through France, into Spain and Portugal, and up to the UK. This is an image of a Celtic helmet. Now, this is another thing we find about the Celts, but they wore some crazy helmets, that's true. This does look very crazy, very funny, but where did they wear them? We don't think they wore them in battles. For example, this one with a bird, it flaps like a bird. It moves up and down with the wings. And that is not very easy to use in battle, in fights, in wars. So we think they probably only use these for special times, special days, special ceremonies and occasions. Here is the famous Asterix. And again, you can see some really crazy helmets here, but as we said, they only wore them on special occasions, perhaps not into battle. Also, as I said, they were craftsmen. They were warriors and they fought, but they also made some amazing jewelry like this. This is a Celtic crown made of gold. It's called a torque. They also had some crazy helmets and some other jewelry like belts and brooches. So they were famous for being craftsmen. That is, people who make things from wood, from iron, and from other metals. But where do they live today? Do they still live today? Well, it's true, they do. They have 7 nations in Northern Europe. Here you can see the UK with England. There were no Celts in England, or not many, but mostly in Scotland in the north, in Ireland in the west, and Wales, west of England, and also in northern France and northern Spain. So we have Wales, Scotland, Ireland, Brittany, which is in France, Cornwall in the south of England, and Galicia in Spain, along with Asturias and the Isle of Man. So this is where they live today. Let's look a little closer. This is the UK as we know it. And actually, the UK is made of Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and England. And if you look very closely, right here in South Wales, you can see where I come from. That's my hometown. And in addition, Welsh is not the same as English. It's very, very different. We have some very, very long place names, some very strange names. For example, this one is very easy to say. It's Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll Gogerich Chwndrobyll Llantysilio Gogogoch. We'll practice that later. Now, as I said, Welsh and English are very different. They are very different people. They come from very different places and they have a very different language. For example, here is Welsh on the left and English on the right. To say hello in Welsh, you would say bore da. Cymru are the Welsh people and Cymraeg is the Welsh language. In the afternoon, you might say prynhawn da, good afternoon, or noswyth da in the evening. And when you're going to bed, you say nos da. Shwmai is to say how are you, and croesio is welcome. As I told you, it's very, very different from English, not the same at all. Another fact about the Celts you may not have known is that they had a festival called Samhain, where they believed that the ghosts and spirits of the dead came back to the world. And this is the origin of Halloween. So without the Celts, we would not have Halloween today. But did the Celts have any religion or gods? Did they believe in anything? Actually, it's true, they did. They believed in animism. But what is animism? Well, animism is a belief in spirits, in ghosts. And these spirits and ghosts and gods lived in nature. They lived in the forests. They were part of the forests. They also inhabited or lived in rivers and lakes. And rivers and lakes were seen as the door to the spirit world, where the gods lived, another world. But I said the Celts and Shinto are linked. How are they linked? Well, they both made shrines. Shrines are special places you go to worship, to pray, to pay respect. And the Celts, they made shrines in special trees they thought were sacred or special. They also understood that water was very important to life. And they believed in special spirits and gods of the lakes and the seas. So they made shrines in special lakes. As we said, Shinto is linked because in Shinto, water is also extremely important. What about animism? Well, what is animism? The Celts believed that animals and nature had spirits, or in Shinto, kami. I know I'm saying that wrong, I apologize, but they believed that the animals and nature had a soul, had a spirit, had a life. And this is also echoed in Shinto. Shinto had similar beliefs on animals and spirits and gods. For example, in Shinto, they believe in kami, these spirits of the mountains, the rivers, the plants, and the animals. So what have we learnt about the Celts and Shinto? First of all, they were warriors. They fought a lot of battles. Next, I can't see that, unfortunately, so I'm going to skip on and go to the next one. And as I said, it's true, they did paint themselves blue to fight, to frighten, to scare the enemy. And women were equal, which was not the same anywhere else in the world at the time. They came from Eastern Europe and Central Europe, near where Ukraine is today. At least we think. And also they lived all over Europe in different tribes and clans. They had funny, crazy hats for celebrations, but not for battles, not for war. And now they continue to live. Celts exist in Northern Europe, but mostly in the UK and in Northern France, but not in England, mostly. Also, Celts, and I am a Celt, we have a very different language, as I said. And finally, we would not have Halloween today without the Celts. They believed animals and nature have spirits or kami, and water was extremely important and special to them. As we said, Shinto has similar beliefs of spirits, of kami in different places and also in animals. And finally, I have a few books you might enjoy if you would like to learn a little bit more about the Celts. We start with a funny history called The Cutthroat Celts from Horrible Histories, and that's by Terry Deary and Martin Brown, a very enjoyable, sometimes gruesome book. Then the next one we have are Myths and Legends of the Celts, an excellent book by James McKillop. And one of my favorites, A Child's Christmas in Wales by the famous poet, the famous Welsh poet, Dylan Thomas. And lastly, The Celtic Heritage, Traditions in Ireland and Wales. I hope you enjoyed my presentation of the Celts, and I hope you learned something. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dom. If you want to stop your screen share, we can talk a little bit.
I shall try. Here we go. Yeah. Excellent.
Okay. Katy, do you have any questions or comments for Dom?
Yes, firstly, that was a really nice presentation. I actually did not know anything about the Celts and the Shinto, so that was very informative. Thank you. I like the fact that the women were equal, especially at that time. That's something we're struggling with even today, so that was pretty interesting. And also, as a kid, I used to love Asterix and Obelix comics, so it's nice to know that it's not just imagination or made up, like it's kind of based on something. And then the question that I had is, are there any museums that are dedicated to learning about them, and are there any artifacts to this day that they kept from that time that are like genuine and real?
Absolutely, a great question. Thank you very much for your comments. So there are museums of the Celts, mostly around Wales and Scotland and Ireland, some in northern France and a little bit in northern Spain, where the Celts live today. But because we don't have so much history of the Celts, we don't have so much remains, the objects that they created and their stories. As we said, they didn't write anything down, ever. They never wrote. So the only history we have are the Romans who wrote about them. But for the objects, for the artifacts, they do exist in these museums, but because we have so few of these artifacts, unfortunately, they never really fill a whole museum or an art gallery. So we have the British Museum, which will have some Celtic history, and also some museums in Wales, which still have some artifacts, but unfortunately, not a great deal. They do exist, but not many left, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. We also got some more comments. Yuna first was asking if that was a hawk on the helmet and said it looks really cool.
I think it could have been a hawk. We're not sure. It may have been a falcon, a peregrine falcon, which we had around the area at the time, which is similar to a hawk, but slightly smaller.
Okay. And Ski Kusa asked, Welsh words sound fantastic. Do you use the Welsh greetings in your daily life?
I would love to. Unfortunately, the only times I use Welsh these days, because I don't speak Welsh fluently, I speak a little bit of Welsh. I tend to say happy birthday and Merry Christmas to people in Welsh, and that's it. So Merry Christmas would be Nadolig Llawen, and happy birthday is Penblwydd Hapus. Unfortunately, that's about it.
Okay, thank you so much. And then your presentation about Celts reminds me of the free folk of the Game of Thrones. Not sure if you've watched though. I feel like I want to read some of the books you recommended. Thank you for the presentation. Would you say there's a maybe inspiration the Game of Thrones took from the Celts there?
I think there definitely is. There's lots of warrior tribal nations around the world in myths and histories and books and films and TV shows. And yes, they more often are related to the Celts because the Celts were everywhere in Europe. So there's a long tradition there. So there's a good chance they are related.
Okay. And yeah, in the same comment, Yuna also said, as well as the book about Trevor Noah, what teacher Katy recommended earlier. So she plans to check out Born a Crime as well, and as well as some of the Celtic books. And then also we have a comment in Japanese saying, I didn't know that the Celtic women were equal even at that time. That's great. And she also asked about the jewelry design, if that is related to, I feel like the lineage of the person. Do you know anything about those jewelry designs?
The truly design? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
The jewelry design, the accessories you mentioned, like the bracelets.
They were normally used in special ceremonies. So, for example, what we saw, the torque, the gold ring, was a crown worn by the Celtic, I suppose, the priests, the clans, etc., and normally the kings of different tribes and clans.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And let me actually go back a little bit because we got some more comments for Katy's presentation as well. Skikusa was saying, I like watching his daily show on YouTube. Do you watch the show? And if so, how do you like it? And they also said that they unfortunately missed a part of the presentation, but they will watch it on YouTube later on when this goes online.
Okay, so I do love watching The Daily Show. He does have a segment in the show. It's called Between the Scenes, and that's basically when he's interacting with the crowd in studio as well. So you get to see how genuine and authentic he is. But yes, I do love the show, and everybody in South Africa just loves Trevor Noah as a comedian.
Okay, thank you so much. I see somebody helped clarify the earlier question that I might have misunderstood about the jewelry from the Celts. Different clans have different design is what the question means, I think. So would you say
that is,
that is true, right?
That is very, very true. Everywhere they had their own traditions, beliefs, and designs, which they like to show off.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. We have a little bit of time left. So if you want to, I would say you can also talk a little bit about your lessons on Cafe Talk and what kind of lessons you would recommend our viewers today to take on your profile that they might enjoy. Katy, if you want to start, you just want to talk a little bit about your lessons?
Okay, so I provide mostly English lessons on my profile. I do have a lot of South African oriented lessons. So travel through South Africa, different South African cultures, because as I mentioned earlier, we have about 12 different cultures and tribes of people in South Africa. And that's 12 different languages. I know 4 out of the 12. There's people that know, there's people that know much more. So you can definitely learn about South African history, South Africa today, the different cultures. It's so diverse, so beautiful. Our country is actually called the Rainbow Nation because of all the different people that make South Africa as well. So yeah, that's mostly my lessons.
Great. And you do have a lesson about the book itself as well, right?
Yes, I do have a lesson, a Trevor Noah lesson book. Lesson, and it's more in depth. It's longer than the presentation, and I also do read some reviews about the book as well as some stories about the book, just to get the gist and the idea of how he tells the story, the different essays, the different stories, how he tells them, and how each story has a very meaningful lesson that you could learn from it as well.
For the English learners, would you say that's about an intermediate level book, or
I have
what would you recommend it for?
So I have a beginner and intermediate. So I do offer lessons for children as well as intermediate lessons, with grammar and speaking as well. With children, there's shapes and colors, basic math, things like that. So yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, Don, do you want to introduce your lessons?
Absolutely, thank you. Well, I teach mostly English on my lesson list. Of course, I have the normal conversation lessons where we chat. These can be structured or unstructured, meaning we can just chat about anything. Or I also have vocabulary games, exercises, quizzes, music, a little bit of everything, whatever suits you. And also, if you want to really improve your English a little more, to make it a lot bigger in terms of vocabulary, I would suggest my word power lessons, which are all about broadening and expanding your vocabulary using idioms, as we know, and also collocations, which are very common in English and very useful. That's why it's called word power, to give you the power to use English. Also, I do some lessons on stories, on books. So for the younger learners, for the children, up to about 14 years old, I do reading popular stories. And this, at the moment, we're doing a lovely book called Charlotte's Web. But we also do short stories, longer stories. This includes games, activities, exercises, lots of different skills. And for the older audience, I do my fantasy and science fiction book, which is a book of your choice, a story of a choice, or just chat about the books. Again, it includes vocabulary games, exercises, quizzes, and music. So anything you like.
Okay, thank you so much. Chat has sent some more questions, so let me actually go back to this one. Yeah, one student is asking to Katy, do children in South Africa learn about his story in school?
Yes, the children in South Africa learn about South African history as well as worldwide history, but it's actually mostly, I would say, European history. I would think that's because South Africa was colonized by the British very long time ago. So even our school curriculum is tailored more to learning more about Europe and the United Kingdom and their history. But we do learn a little bit of world history, but mostly it is South Africa and European history.
Is the story of Trevor Noah part of that, or not at all?
No, it's actually quite new. But they do have book clubs as well, like what we have here, and they do discuss the book as a book club.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And one student also said, I'm surprised to know that women are equal to men such a long time ago. In Japan, I feel it's not so even now. I wonder if the equality changed in the history. Did it ever change to male dominated, and how is it now? That's in regards to Dom's presentation, sorry, yeah.
That's okay. I think in this regard, the Celts were the only people at the time who did this, who valued their women, because they didn't really know of other cultures when this started. They saw women as equal because they could provide for the tribe, for the clan. And I think, unfortunately, when the Celts moved to different countries, they did unfortunately get influenced by the society at the time. So even when they lived in the UK, in Wales, for example, the women were continued to be equal. But in England, just next door, it was the opposite. Women were lower. And unfortunately, as the Celts died out, the Western spirit of women being lower than men continued across most of the world.
Okay. Then also another question for Dom. On your lesson, Build Your Word Power, it says for upper intermediate advanced students. I'm not sure if I'm upper intermediate, but can I try? So
absolutely. I should update that actually, because I have had some lower intermediate and intermediate students and even some advanced beginners who have taken this course, and I have managed to adapt the material for them. So I would say, as long as you are a upper elementary, upper beginner, and a lower intermediate, you can take the lesson. I'll make sure it's suited for your level.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, one of your students actually also said, I took Teacher Dom's lesson before, which was amazing. Gave me an elaborate feedback. Thank you so much. So we should all try those lessons. Oh, and Yuna also said in Japan, they used to be equal too, as far as I know. So it seems that there's some similar history there as well.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for everybody who sent comments. 皆様コメントありがとうございました。Yeah, I think we're nearing the end now. Is there anything in the end that you want to say to your students before we say goodbye? Yeah.
Oh, I would just like to say thank you to all the students that attended.
And from me, thanks very much for coming and listening. I hope you enjoyed the history of the Celts or learnt a little. And I will be online in Cafe Talk if you want to have a lesson for the next hour.
Oh yeah, online standby. If you have some time on online standby, please.
I'll be on online standby as well.
Yeah, please take a look at online standby and check out Katy's and Dom's lessons. オンラインスタンバイご利用したい方は、これから、ドム先生とケティ先生、オンラインスタンバイでいるそうですので、ぜひレッスンを取ってみてください。本日ご参加本当にありがとうございました。Thank you everyone for joining us today. And yeah, I hope to see you again soon for another symposium. Thank you so much.
Thank you.